Yeah, Brian, you mentioned to me last week when we were here that you said you could still learn a lot from the game you had against Bauer in March, having now had the game up there and lost in. Did you feel that not enough was learned, or did you feel like it was a different game? What's your take on it all?
Well, pretty much a rerun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Us not respecting the way to win games of football, and particularly not picking up on the fact that we're playing against a team that will never go away, especially at their own home ground. And I think we did everything in our power to keep them in the game, and then we just couldn't quite finish it off when we got back into it ourselves. So yeah, you learn every week. Probably didn't travel as well as we would have liked to.
It was damaging and tough losing Guy and Logan in the second half. Have you had any? You said you might know more on Monday. Have you had any further updates on those two after their injuries that they went off with?
Well, they're still in the MASH unit. They're all. We'll know more in a couple of hours. Joe Keys too.
Yes.
Got a knock,
right.
So he cobbled through the game. I think a couple of those people won't play this weekend.
With obviously in half partner with Joe was Jordan. Obviously, I caught up with Jordan after the game. There was a bit of an unsavoury incident with a fan who confronted him while he was with his family and friends.
Yeah.
Michael had to sort of pull him away, and I spoke. He calmed down a lot when I spoke to him, but he said he doesn't mind being criticised. He felt there was a time and a place, and he didn't think that was okay. You talked to me years ago about running that gauntlet pod, so when the fans aren't happy and running up the bank. What do you make of it all? Is there a time and a place for criticism? You know the players are right for it, but is there a way that can be done, or what do you make of it?
Well, I can't speak for the fans.
Yeah.
Clearly, a few of them were upset about the result. You best believe I was, and all the players was, and Jordan Lilly was. They don't go out to play like that and produce something like that. But I think there's a time and place for it. I think emotions run high. Unusually, it was a hot day for Barrow, so so I think if you take it with a pinch of salt, it's not nice. I don't advocate it. I think if you got beef with the players, put your sentiments on a letter or something and do it that way. I don't think screaming and bawling at them because they got beaten helps in any way, really. We're supposed to be fans and support people.
There'll be a lot of support and a lot of excitement among those fans that Reid is back this weekend. You had him back for a couple of weeks in April, and obviously since then he's played a bit and he was in that Challenge Cup final squad. Do you think you're getting back almost an even better version of Reid, who's learned quite a bit probably in the last 3 months since you last had him?
Well, I hope so. He's in a full-time environment as well, so that crossing the T's and dotting the I's gets done every week. I've never had any doubts about his ability, and neither have Hull Kingston Rovers. But he needs some game time, and what better place than where he plied his trade last year, and with quite a few people that he knows. It's a familiar place for him.
Someone else in the back row, Brian, that you would have hoped would be integral in this part of the season, but sadly has got that season-ending injury, is James. I saw him at Tong last week. What are your hopes around James's role for the rest of the season, given that he's not going to be playing? I'm sure he can still add quite a lot to the dynamic of the setup here.
Well, he was brought to provide that stability on the field, that leadership quality with the way he plays, if you like. We lost him for the season, can't get him back. We've lost quite a few others through the season, lost a couple at the start of the season, so it's important that we adjust. I didn't think that had any bearing on last week's game. I thought there were different reasons for why we didn't perform as well as we should have. For 20 minutes we were very good in the second half, and then got a bit dishevelled towards the back end. But there were positives, and I know it sounds difficult to take, but there were positives from the game. They just got to stop giving themselves a mountain to climb, and we've got to understand that rugby league's a brutal game if you don't do certain things in it, and we didn't do those things, and that's why we got caught. But going back to James Donaldson, it's of course he provides great aeration and he provides great leadership qualities, but they're not on the field at the moment, and it's important that he sticks around.
Obviously, there are going to be some leaders on the field. It's a chance to bounce back against Hunslet. It was a really good experience, I would say, that Friday night game against Batley the other week in general. How excited to go through that again. It was a very successful experiment. The team showed some really good stuff, and it was a good win. I imagine you're looking forward to this Friday.
I look forward to every week with this team.
Yeah.
There are good challenges. The element of So we've been beaten 4 times in the league. We've only taken 1 beating by my mind. You know, we've lost 3 games by 2 points or less. So not been that far off in all of the games as by our own standards, as well as we haven't played, if you like, in those games. So it's all fixable, and it's all about getting the right balance and right direction on the field. And I think there'll be an awareness from the players that if they continue to not apply themselves at the right time, it might end badly this season. I don't mean badly as in, you know, might not. We're very ambitious. We want to be at the top end of the table, and we want to be competing in playoff games and finals. And those kind of performances can affect you that way.
Someone who's obviously not compared to the top end is Hunslet. They've lost Dean Moyes, left this week. The bottom of the table, a couple of brutal defeats. You've always told us how tough the Championship is. Does that kind of show the step up that Hunslet have had to cope with? Difficult after such a high last season. They've had a lot of tough times this year.
Yeah, I feel for them. You always feel for people when they're going through that. I absolutely get it with the players. But our job is to win football games as well. So whilst I'm sympathetic with their and empathetic with what they're going through, we can't afford to let that, because everybody aims up against us. So they'll have a dig, because they have to do. There'll be a new coach coming in. There'll be a new direction for the club, and a lot of people want to be part of that. So ours is about putting our house in order and understanding that, you know, we've got to be a whole lot better than we were last week.
Thanks a lot, Brian.
Pleasure.
Brian, after the defeat to Barrow, you mentioned distractions. I know you said you couldn't divulge what those distractions were, but have you addressed those distractions for this week? So, you know, there's no distractions going into this game against Hunslet on Friday.
Yeah, I think so.
And when you watched that game back, how tough, sort of painful was that review with the side, knowing that in that second half Bradford probably were the, you know, to a neutral point of view, the better team, and then only to go on and throw that away?
The review process was slightly different this week, so I'm really confident that the players are aware of. I think there's an element of accountability from the staff to the players, and then, but more importantly, between the players themselves. And I think we've generated that. I think we've done it a bit differently, and I think we're aware of it, all of us, about how we have to be accountable with each other when things are not quite going right on the field.
I spoke to Joe Keys after the game, and he mentioned that he felt that this was a whole team issue, not individuals, that at times there was a lack of respect for Barrow and a lack of respect for the game and where it was. Is that something you've spoken about addressing?
Maybe in different words, different terminology, but the same thing. I understand what Joe's saying there, and I completely agree with him. The language that we use together is probably different, but it's rugby league. An element of enthusiasm from the opposition and energy and being at home and, you know, element of travel for us and all of these little things that you can focus on shouldn't take away from the fact that 2 points for the Bulls particularly is important every week.
Fair to say the effort levels, you know, there was no complaints whatsoever.
No, there's nobody not having a dig.
Resilience is a word you've used a few times this year, Brian. Would you have liked to have seen more resilience in those important moments of that game?
Well, a few game smarts towards the back end would have really helped us, and we didn't quite get there because we'd been on a roll, got over the line 3 times, we were back in the winning the game, and all of the things that you're fully aware of. So a few game smarts, and then being able to see it out would have been important. Yeah.
You mentioned you've changed how you approach the review.
Well, not. Well, we have. We've done it a little bit differently this week, but fundamentally, the messages are the same, and the awareness, I think, will be more illuminated.
Because I was just going to say, 3 of the last 6 games have ended in narrow defeats. 2 of those against York and Barrow, winning positions turning into losing positions.
That's a good observation.
How much work, Brian, have you felt the need to highlight that in these reviews? I guess I'm coming at.
Yeah, it's been mentioned, well, more than mentioned. So it's a good observation that you make. It's not just about the end of games. It's about getting over the line and the way that you have to play. It's not very well. It is difficult if you're not doing it, but it's not an effort thing. It's an intelligence thing. It's a rugby intelligence thing, and a listening thing at times about playing a certain way at certain times. It's game management. Our game management's a bit off, but it wasn't off the first half of the season, and it will come back this second half of the season.
Is it a very firmly from yourself and Lee Greenwood, it's up to you now as players to respond and learn from these experiences and defeats?
No, it's come from the players. They don't want to get beaten every week in those circumstances. Anybody, I've told you this many times all over the years, anybody can take a beating if you're beaten by a better team on the day. It's frustrating when you don't get across the line, if they'd have done some of the things that we're doing right throughout the game, it would have been a whole lot easier afternoon.
How important is it that you're still patient in your beliefs, Brian, and panic doesn't set in, that this perhaps might be a bit of form coming in at the wrong time of the season?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about that. I think other teams will have big games and they'll be against us, and vice versa. I think that the division's well set up. It wasn't fatal, the loss at Barrow. I think I mentioned it on Sunday. It kind of takes away a little bit of wriggle room for us. So we're under the pump, but that's where we want to be. We want to play in big games all the time. We want to be challenged. And I think it's our methodology when we're challenged that needs to change, not our desire, our hunger, our ability, our talent. It's our methodology of how we go about games.
I know I'm jumping back in the TARDIS 20 years, Brian.
Go back to that TARDIS.
To that game at Wakefield, around about, funnily enough, strangely enough, around this same time when Bradford went to Wakefield and suffered a bad defeat in the June-July heat. When you look back at what happened 20 years ago, can you were the head coach then, Brian, can you use what happened at Barrow last weekend in a similar sort of focus point, that there is 10 games to go, there is a chance to turn things around and not, deliver that kind of style of performance again?
Of course there's time. There's time in a week. It doesn't take it wasn't quite, I remember that day intimately, it wasn't quite as bad as the Wakefield performance, trust me, but there were some similar symptoms. So it's just the timing that's the same. I think this team's in a completely different position, but it's important that the accountability that particular team held themselves to is replicated now. That's the big message of that, and I'm confident it has been. When
you mention no wiggle room, Brian, how do you interpret that? Is it just plain and simply to achieve top two, we can't afford to drop any more points?
Well, I think you know me well enough, even from the start of the year, you have to take game by game, and paying attention to game by game, the rest of it unfolds. I think you can cause yourself a whole lot of ulcers and bad nights and sleepless nights by saying, well, if we do X, Y and Z and win 7 from 4, and there's too many calculations because there's too many good teams in the Championship. So there will be teams that beat each other when you don't expect it, and there will be teams that underperform, and so you have to live. For me, when it gets down to the last 4 or 5 games, it gets a whole lot clearer what you need to do.
Bradford's still fundamentally, Brian, in a very, very good position, in the table. Yeah. Yes, York are hot on the heels and taking Bradford out of the top 2 for now, but with 10 teams to go, there's still a lot of rugby league to be played and a lot of points available.
I agree.
And what I'm trying to get at, Brian, is in terms of the top 2 goal, what you have kind of set out, there's a heck of a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and I think everybody's still got to play each other. They're in that top 3, top 4. I think understanding where we went wrong last week is our first priority. I think that's been achieved, and then I think getting some troops healthy and ramping up for this back end of the year is what we all want to do. But I promise you there'll be ups and downs for all the teams.
Just seen Mitch Suter, George Tafua on the corridor, Brian. What's the latest with them? Obviously, we had the disappointing news with James Donaldson, but just how close or far off are George Tafua and Mitch Suter?
It's a good question. Maybe a couple of weeks for Mitch, hopefully. And there's good news on him. George Tafua, I think he has a scan sometime in the next fortnight that will give us a whole lot clearer picture, but I'm hoping it won't be too much longer after that scan. Fingers crossed.
Joe said after the game he felt he was struggling with his knee. Is that serious, or might he miss Friday as a precaution?
I think it's serious enough for him to be thought about for Friday, definitely, yeah. So again, I'm not intimately sure, but I don't think he will.
And Guy Armitage, Brian, what's the sort of like latest with him? Can we expect him to feature? Or?
Again, we don't know. He'll do a little bit of running tonight, so we're hoping it's not that serious, but I don't think he'll play.
I messaged John Keir at the start of the week, and I think he's more than happy if you decide to recall Kieran Gill to release him. I know it's a set sort of RFL deadline of 14 days, but when I spoke to the RFL, if John's happy and you're happy for Kieran to come back, can we expect to see Kieran Gill back this week?
Well, common sense prevails, doesn't it? Batley don't have a game, so to keep one of our players out when we've got 5 or 6 or 7 injuries, that's why there'll be a dispensation, because it's the common sense thing to do. It doesn't make sense that we go get a lone player. We've got one of our own players that are perfectly available to play. So, yeah, I hope that'll come to fruition, I'm sure.
You're confident you'll get the dispensation from the RFL?
Yeah.
And just on, obviously, Kieran Gill's performance for Batley, have you watched it, Brian? Have you spoken to Kieran about that?
Yeah, I've spoken to Kieran about it, yeah.
And I presume if Guy doesn't make it, he'll be in a slot back in for the first time.
I'm confident you won't get that slot, Mick.
Hunslet, as Nathan says, Dean Mayo unfortunately lost his job on Monday morning. It's a very similar situation to a fortnight ago when Mark Moxon had been party company with Batley. What sort of challenges does that kind of throw at you? Because obviously I'm led to believe Kyle Trout's going to take over in the interim, and they're obviously going to have a bit of an uplift, just like Batley did a fortnight ago, which does present a few challenges.
All of those things. We'll get ready for the best of Hunslet. But that is our challenge for the rest of the season. And honestly, disappointed for Dean. Disappointed that when this happens in professional sport, it's not nice. It's not a nice thing that happens. But again, it's about us this week, not about them.
Have you spoken to Dean at all with him being a Bradford?
Only earlier in the season about players.
So this sort of finally, Brian, what are your expectations then for your side on Friday at Odsal?
A whole lot better measured performance than we got up in Barrow.